There is a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there about crypto, particularly about Bitcoin. Ironically enough, most of it has come from the same mainstream media outlets that claim to fight fake news. Readers of their hit pieces are often left feeling like they should stay away from crypto and BTC. Some would argue that that's the entire point. Whatever the reason, it's high time to correct the record. My name is Guy, and today I'm going to address some of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin, reveal which are justified, discuss how they can be addressed, and examine why the mainstream media's tone on crypto is about to change. I'll start by saying that most of the information in this video comes from a report titled, quote, "Revisiting Persistent Bitcoin Criticisms." It was published earlier this month by Fidelity, one of the largest asset managers in the world. We'll leave a link to the report in the description if you're interested. Now, the report begins with a bit of background. Basically, Fidelity has been speaking with wealthy individual and institutional investors about their views on Bitcoin since November 2020. Over the years, they've noticed that these investors have consistently brought up 9 criticisms of the project. Now, Fidelity has divided these criticisms into 2 categories, with 5 being misconceptions and 4 being potentially valid criticisms. The 5 misconceptions are that BTC is too volatile to be a store of value, that BTC has failed as a means of payment, that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, that Bitcoin will be replaced by a competitor, and that Bitcoin is not backed by anything. If these misconceptions sound familiar, that's because these are the ones that you see most often in the mainstream media. Chances are that this is where Fidelity's investors got their information from. If so, it underscores the importance of educating the average person about crypto. On which note, if you want to help others get educated about crypto, smash that like button and share this video. Now, regarding the potentially valid criticisms, you'll remember that there are 4. These are that there could be a bug in Bitcoin's code that makes it worthless, that regulations will slow Bitcoin adoption, that people could lose interest in Bitcoin, and that there are, quote, unknown unknowns about Bitcoin. From Fidelity's perspective, the possibility of any of the above occurring is very small, but nonetheless large enough for these criticisms to be somewhat justified. More importantly, these are criticisms that need to be addressed for large investors to feel comfortable investing in BTC and crypto in general. But we'll come back to that later. First, we need to address those misconceptions. You'll recall that the first misconception is that BTC is too volatile to be a store of value. The authors argue that BTC is volatile mainly because it trades, quote, without intervention. This could be a subtle reference to the US government's so-called plunge protection team, which stabilizes TradFi markets. More about that in the description. I digress. The authors go on to highlight the fact that BTC's volatility has actually been on the decline as its adoption has grown. As a fun fact, Cointelegraph Research estimates that BTC's volatility could fall to the same level as the US dollar in the next 10 to 20 years, assuming its adoption continues, obviously. For now, though, BTC remains more volatile than most assets, something that the authors themselves admit. Even so, they insist that its volatility will decline as people start to realize that its similarity to gold also makes it a store of value. Note that we did a video comparing BTC to gold a couple of months ago. On that note, it seems that the authors missed one of the main reasons why BTC is volatile. People are still trying to understand what it is and how to measure its value. On the one hand, BTC is a scarce digital asset. On the other hand, Bitcoin is technically the most secure payment network on the planet. At the philosophical level, the fundamental purpose of BTC is to take the power to control money away from the central banks and governments. Now, nobody knows how much an asset like this is truly worth, and the fact that only a small percentage of its supply is tradable only adds to the volatility. And that reminds me, if you happen to be into crypto trading, you should check out the Coin Bureau deals page. It's got up to 60% discounts on trading fees and up to $40,000 of bonuses on the best crypto exchanges. This offer is available for a limited time only, so check it out in the description ASAP. Now, where was I? Yes. From our perspective, BTC's volatility has little to nothing to do with its status as a store of value asset. That's simply because other stores of value, like gold, are also volatile. Even fiat currencies are volatile. Consider that the Japanese yen has lost almost 30% of its value against the US dollar over the last 2 years. Anyways, the second misconception is that Bitcoin has failed as a means of payment. The authors argue that Bitcoin purposely sacrificed scalability for decentralization and security. They also point out that it's wrong to compare Bitcoin's 7 transactions per second to Visa's 40,000 transactions per second. That's because transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain are instantly settled, whereas the thousands of payments that Visa processes are only settled after the fact, sometimes days later. The authors also note the fact that Bitcoin settled $3.1 trillion worth of transactions in 2022, 40% of what MasterCard did. What this means is that Bitcoin can be used to settle high-value transactions, and the authors seem to imply that this is what Bitcoin ought to be used for. As for all the others, the authors believe that they're better suited for Layer 2 scaling solutions like the Lightning Network, which are more scalable than Visa. More about the Lightning Network in the description. Moving on. Now, what's fascinating is that the authors believe it's possible that the main reason why Bitcoin isn't being used as a means of payment is because BTC is taxed as property in the US and most other countries. This means that customers and merchants need to keep track of capital gains or losses on BTC transactions. Again, it seems that the authors missed one of the main reasons why BTC isn't being used for payments. The infrastructure for this is still being developed. This includes the Layer 2 scaling solutions, as well as the applications required to use them. We're arguably still in the early stages of BTC payments. It goes without saying that this is improving by the day, and BTC payments are becoming more widespread as the awareness and adoption of Bitcoin increases. The thing is that this awareness often comes with the added awareness that you probably shouldn't pay for things using a store of value like BTC. That's because stores of value are, well, stores of value. They're not meant to be spent. They're meant to be saved. This is something that's often forgotten today, thanks in large part to the people in power blurring the lines between money and currency. More about that in the description as well. Now, the third misconception is that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Naturally, this is a reference to Bitcoin mining, which uses a large amount of energy. The authors start by pointing out that most of this energy is coming from renewable energy sources, and the trend continues in that direction. Notably, the authors don't deny that Bitcoin mining does use a lot of energy. Rather, they ask whether this energy use is worth it. They admit that the answer depends on who you ask, and go on to explain that if you value things like financial freedom, the ability to transact freely, then yes, it's probably worth it. To those who say it's not worth it, the authors ask whether the energy waste associated with the existing financial system is worth it. After all, there are estimates that the financial system uses more energy than Bitcoin mining. Heck, even clothes dryers are estimated to emit more carbon than Bitcoin mining. And speaking of which, the authors spend a lot of time talking about how Bitcoin mining is being used to reduce such emissions. For instance, Bitcoin mining can be done using flared gas, which would otherwise go into the atmosphere. Bitcoin mining can also help subsidize renewable energy operations. And, as you might have guessed, the authors seem to have missed one of the main reasons why Bitcoin is not bad for the environment. If you watched our video about why inflation is destroying the planet, you'll know that BTC is deflationary. This incentivizes saving instead of spending. By contrast, the existing financial system is inflationary. This incentivizes spending over saving. The result is overconsumption, which lies at the core of most of the environmental damage. If the world switched to using a deflationary currency, this would stop overnight without the need for a single regulation or tax. The only reason this hasn't happened already is because powerful individuals and institutions have trillions of dollars of debt that they can't possibly pay back. Deflation would make that debt more expensive and cause them to default. So, the inflation must continue at all costs. Anyhow, the fourth misconception is that Bitcoin will be replaced by a competitor. The authors start by acknowledging the fact that Bitcoin's code being open source means that anyone could start their own Bitcoin. However, they argue that it's not possible to create the same network effect or ecosystem. They go on to explain that dozens of crypto projects which branded themselves as the next Bitcoin have come and gone, mainly because they compromised on the qualities that make BTC valuable and thus failed. To prove their point, they point to the fact that most of crypto's market cap is Bitcoin. And what's interesting is that this infographic includes ETH dominance, which has risen considerably over the last 2 years or so. This is presumably a reference to the possibility that Ethereum could someday flip Bitcoin by market cap, yet another topic we've discussed at length in another video. Now, not to go on too much of a tangent, but it's possible that this will never happen. That's simply because Bitcoin has no actual competition in the store of value niche, whereas Ethereum has no shortage of it in the smart contract niche. The increasing popularity of alternatives is effectively reducing Ethereum's market cap. The more you know. Now, the fifth misconception is that BTC is not backed by anything. This is yet another popular talking point among mainstream media pundits, notably those closely affiliated with Wall Street. The authors argue that BTC is backed by immutable computer code and its ecosystem participants. This includes the users who transact on the blockchain, miners who process these transactions, nodes who store the history of these transactions, developers who maintain and upgrade the code, and BTC holders. The authors stress that a large ecosystem of these participants is what backs BTC. As such, every additional user, miner, node, developer, or holder further increases BTC's backing. Others have argued that BTC is also backed by the energy being used to secure the Bitcoin blockchain. This being the case, then Bitcoin's immense energy use suggests that it's backed by more than most assets. But alas, it seems that the authors missed the underlying fact, and that's that BTC has value because people believe that it does. At the end of the day, that is all that matters. If we all decided that gold had no value, then its price would drop close to zero, not to absolute zero as it's still used for some manufacturing. And this is especially true when it comes to fiat currencies, which are quite literally backed by the government's dictate. That's literally the meaning of fiat. If we all decided that our fiat currencies were worthless, then they would actually go to zero. That's why financial authorities are so obsessed with appearances and credibility. It's also why financial authorities are terrified of any competition from foreign fiat currencies or truly sovereign currencies like BTC. And come to think of it, it's a good thing that most of them don't consider BTC to be a currency. If they did, then it would probably increase the likelihood of a regulatory crackdown. Anyhow, you'll recall that the 4 remaining criticisms could be justified, and the first of these is the possibility that a bug in Bitcoin's code could make it worthless. The authors start by acknowledging that a bug is always possible given that we're dealing with a truly global network of miners and nodes. The authors then detail 2 instances where Bitcoin experienced a bug. The first instance occurred in 2010. Someone managed to mint 184 billion BTC without mining. Fortunately, this was quickly fixed by Satoshi Nakamoto himself. Unfortunately, however, the second instance was a lot more problematic. In 2013, Bitcoin was taken offline for 6 hours after an upgrade to its node software caused a temporary fork of its blockchain. Thankfully, miners and developers were able to coordinate a solution and roll back the Bitcoin blockchain to the block before the fork, but it still caused BTC to drop by 20% to $37. And yes, I know what you're thinking, I also wish I had bought the dip back then too. Regrets aside, the authors emphasize the fact that Bitcoin has had no technical issues since 2013 and has had 99.9% uptime since 2009. Still, they admit that another technical issue after a future upgrade is theoretically possible, and this could result in a, quote, precipitous price decline. Yikes. Now, with this criticism, we're honestly surprised that the authors didn't mention anything about quantum computing. This appears to be a much bigger threat than a bug at this point in time. For context, quantum computers could theoretically crack Bitcoin's cryptographic code, rendering it useless. The good news is that this is a tail risk Bitcoin developers are aware of. A malicious actor with a quantum computer would also probably target other infrastructure first, such as banks. The bad news is that governments could theoretically use quantum computers to take down Bitcoin if it becomes a threat. So let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. Lo and behold, this possibility ties into the second potentially justifiable criticism of Bitcoin, and that's that regulations could slow Bitcoin adoption. The authors argue that regulation is bullish, not bearish. That's because it sends a signal that Bitcoin is significant enough to warrant regulation. But they also acknowledge that there are circumstances where this regulation could become excessive. They seem to imply that Signature Bank and Silvergate Bank are two examples of this. They were both pressured by regulators to shut down. Now, it's crazy that Fidelity is implying this in a report. And this relates to something that the authors would never imply, much less admit, and that's that it's powerful asset managers and megabanks which influence much of the financial regulation in the United States. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler has admitted in hearings that these are the public comments they listen to. If you've been keeping up with our coverage of crypto regulations, you'll know that there appears to be a battle for influence between the asset managers and the megabanks when it comes to crypto regulations. The asset managers want to make money, but the megabanks don't want competition. Now, we could be mistaken, but when you view crypto regulations through this lens, particularly in the US, then the inconsistencies from regulators like the SEC start to make sense. Now, it's too soon to say which of these interests will win the war of influence, but recent events suggest the asset managers are currently winning. If this is the case, then you can bet that we will start to see more reasonable crypto regulations introduced as the years go by. That's just because these asset managers are likely to make a lot of money on crypto, and you can bet that they're going to use this money to influence even more regulators. It's a bit messed up, but hey, it'll be bullish for Bitcoin and for crypto in the end. And this relates to the third rational criticism of Bitcoin, and that's that people could start to lose interest. Now, what's insane is that the authors believe it's possible that this could happen because of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. This is insane because they couldn't be more different. Whereas BTC was designed for financial freedom, CBDCs are designed for total financial control. If you've watched any of our many videos about CBDCs, you'll know that central banks have explicitly stated that they intend to do things like limit how much you can save and how you can spend your money. It's hard to fathom how people would start to prefer CBDCs over BTC given these qualities. If anything, the introduction of CBDCs would further incentivize them to get their money out of the traditional financial system and into assets like BTC and gold. It's possible that we're seeing the early stages of that. Now, to be fair, the authors seem to assume that the CBDC in question would not have these qualities, and they imagine a scenario wherein people don't care at all about things like financial freedom. And, funnily enough, they seem to lump those who don't care about crypto decentralization into the same category. Hear, hear. What's even more illuminating is the fact that Bitcoin's adoption continues to grow, something that the authors put on full display. Specifically, the number of Bitcoin wallets holding fewer than 10 BTC has exploded over the last decade or so. indicating not only more adoption, but more wealth distribution. But back to the possibility that people could lose interest. In a world where governments and central banks are increasingly trying to control what we can do and say, the idea that technologies like cryptocurrency, which allow us to maintain this self-sovereignty, would fall out of favour seems impossible. In our opinion, the only way this would happen is if governments and central banks succeed in censoring true information about Bitcoin and crypto and replace it with their false propaganda. Some would say that this is exactly what we're seeing today, but, well, let's not go there. Now, the fourth criticism of Bitcoin is one that we agree with, and that's that there are unknown unknowns. In plain English, there could be a problem that nobody could have anticipated. Conversely, things like a bug in Bitcoin's code are known unknowns, meaning we know they could happen, just not when or how. What's spooky is that the authors include the reappearance of Satoshi Nakamoto as one of the known unknowns. This is spooky because Coinbase also noted the return of Satoshi as a potential risk to the exchange in one of its SEC filings. It's believed that Satoshi holds 1 million BTC. Imagine if he, or they, sold. Anyhow, spookiness aside, the fact of the matter is that there's no shortage of unknown unknowns when it comes to Bitcoin. This is because of something we mentioned earlier. We're still early in crypto's adoption cycle, objectively speaking. There is a lot we don't know, including how to properly measure BTC's value. The authors also note something that we would have forgotten, and that's to remind everyone that they need to be comfortable with knowing that there are unknown unknowns. Moreover, investors should take the time to ensure that their portfolios are protected against such black swan events, if possible. Now, all of this brings us to the big question, and that's why the mainstream media's tone on crypto is about to change. At first glance, it seems that this is completely unrelated to what we just discussed. Upon closer inspection, however, you'll realise that asset managers like BlackRock can influence these outlets. Similarly to the regulators, it seems that for a long time it was the megabanks who had the upper hand with the media. As time goes on, however, it seems that the asset managers are more in control of the narrative, at least when it comes to crypto. If this is indeed true, then we could see less FUD. The caveat is that these asset managers also have enemies in the crypto industry, particularly exchanges and stablecoin issuers that refuse to be controlled and are based outside of the United States. Not surprisingly, most of the recent crypto FUD in the mainstream media has focused on these entities. This further underscores the importance of educating the average person about crypto. As amazing as it is that the mainstream media could soon start to support the industry, this support will likely go to the entities aligned with the asset managers and their allies. The others will continue to be opposed. Over time, this favoritism could turn the crypto industry into yet another arm of the existing financial system, something that many crypto regulations explicitly seek to do. It seems that the only solution to this existential problem is to ensure that the average person is aware of what's really going on. And you can rest assured that this is something we will continue to do. Okay, that's all for today's video. So if you found it informative, be sure to smash that like button to let us know. If you want to stay informed, subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell. And if you want to help inform others, be sure to share this video with them. Remember that the Coin Bureau Deals page has trading fee discounts of up to 60% and up to $40,000 of bonuses on the best crypto exchanges. It's also got the biggest discounts on the best hardware wallets too. The link will be down in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.